Contract amounts are getting crazy right now.
Let's both guess right now. Closest to the pin.
Oh, like years in contract amount? It's 7,205.
8,206.
Actual retail price.
11-year, $300 million deal.
With that, it's a good time to take a look at some of these mega deals in the past. We looked at some of the worst in the last video. Now let's jump into the ones that actually worked. Coming up, the top 15 $100+ million contracts of all time after the intro. I'm using the same methodology as my earlier worst $100+ million contracts in baseball history. So, as an effort to get right to the list, a quick overview. Using dollars per wins above replacement as the ranking metric, not including any contracts that are currently ongoing with active players. There's still time for these players to produce more or fall off, so it's too early to judge those contracts. Including free agent signings and extensions, except any extension that includes buying out team control or arbitration years. That's especially important on this list because there's a lot of great contracts that buy out arbitration years. For instance, Albert Pujols' extension with the Cardinals would easily top this list, but it bought out 3 arbitration years in the process, so not included. Maybe in the future I'll try to develop some sort of calculation to account for arbitration years in some way, but that's a project for future me, and I still haven't figured out a good way to do that. Finally, inflation numbers are based on baseball inflation, and not monetary inflation. What I mean is all yearly salaries are adjusted to today's value based on the difference between the league average salary then to the league average salary now. Also, the worst contracts list went to 11, but we're going to do a little extra this time and list the top 15. Without further ado, number 15, Alex Rodriguez, 2001 Rangers. There's a reason this list goes to 15. I went to 15 here because I really wanted to talk about this contract. I mentioned on the worst contracts list that Mike Hampton signed the largest contract in baseball history on December 9th, 2000 at 8 years, $121 million. What I didn't mention is it was the largest contract in baseball history for only 2 days because on December 11th, the Rangers signed A-Rod to a 10-year, $252 million contract. You're seeing that right. 2 days after the largest contract in baseball history was penned, another contract more than doubled it. Here's the amazing thing though, if someone signs a contract that large for that long of a period of time, there's no way you'd expect them to produce at that level, let alone have it net out as a plus contract. They'd have to have one of the best 10-year spans in baseball history. A-Rod not only did that, but performed so well he even opted out of the last 3 years of the contract so he could sign an even bigger deal with the Yankees. In the 7 years of this contract, A-Rod produced 56.4 WAR. Since 1950, only 8 other position players have had a 7-year stretch of more than 56.4 WAR. Albert Pujols, Joe Morgan, Mike Schmidt, Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson, Willie Mays, Mike Trout, and Mickey Mantle. That's pretty good company there. And in those 7 years, A-Rod won MVP 3 times and led the league in home runs 5 times. Adjusted for inflation, there's only 2 contracts that have been a higher total dollar amount since. The 9-year deal Derek Jeter signed with the Yankees in 2002, and the 10-year deal A-Rod signed with the Yankees in 2008. But here's the downside to the contract. Baseball's a team sport. At the time of signing, A-Rod represented 25% of the Rangers' payroll, and that percentage only went up over the first 3 years of the deal, as the Rangers were hamstrung on adding any other talent since they had so much invested in A-Rod. While A-Rod was winning MVPs and putting up historic seasons, the Rangers failed to make the playoffs in all 3 years and were trending in the wrong direction. Signing A-Rod was a go-for-broke move, and if it didn't pay off with a quick dynasty, the Rangers had to ditch the experiment. They ended up trading A-Rod to the Yankees in 2004, and the Yankees had the payroll to surround A-Rod with other stars. They won the AL East in 3 of the next 4 seasons, but unfortunately for them, they fell short in the playoffs and never made it to the World Series during A-Rod's first contract. In the end, A-Rod signed a 7-year deal for an inflation-adjusted $287 million, provided 56.4 WAR for a total of $5.1 million per WAR. Number 14, Miguel Tejada, 2004 Orioles. The MVP shortstop on the 2002 Moneyball A's hit free agency after 2003 and signed a very nice contract at the time at 6 years, $72 million with the Orioles. From there, Tejada produced pretty much how you'd expect an MVP caliber player going from his prime to his mid-30s. Great front-end production with 7.4 WAR the first year of the contract and getting 5th place in the MVP voting, but decreasing every year after. Unfortunately for the Orioles, while Tejada performed very well the first 3 to 4 years of the contract, they never finished over 500, including a 93-loss season in 2007. They ended up trading Tejada to the Astros in 2008, and while Tejada remained healthy with the Astros, playing 158 games each season, his play tailed off as he never reached 2 WAR again the rest of his career. The main value of this contract came in the first couple of years, but that was enough for this contract to make the list. Tejada signed an inflation-adjusted contract of 6 years, $114 million, produced 23.9 WAR for a total of $4.8 million per WAR. Number 13, Adrian Beltre, 2005, Mariners. This one is going to surprise a lot of Mariners fans. In their 6-part, nearly 4-hour documentary on the Mariners, Secret Base highlighted how compared to both his season before joining the Mariners, as well as his run afterwards with the Red Sox and Rangers, Beltre's tenure with the Mariners was the most inconsistent in his career. The thing is, Beltre is a no-doubt Hall of Famer, and for guys that good, even inconsistent years in your late 20s are still going to be solid. In his 2 best years of the contract, he still led the Mariners in WAR with 5.4 in 2006 and 5.6 in 2008. And the 3 other years, he was still a solid player. Mariners fans just look at Beltre's years with the Dodgers, Red Sox, and Rangers and go, what if he had been his usual self? Speaking of which, that's foreshadowing for a later entry in this list. But like all the other entries so far on this list, his productive 5-year deal led to no playoff appearances for the Mariners. Probably another reason Mariners fans don't see this contract as good as it actually was. Beltre signed an inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $101.2 million, produced 21.3 WAR for a total of $4.75 million per WAR. Number 12, Justin Verlander, 2015, Tigers. This is the first extension to make the list, and at the time it looked like the 32-year-old Verlander was penning a lifetime contract with the Tigers, signing a 5-year deal that would take him through age 36. Verlander was also coming off the worst year of his career in 2014, putting up an ERA north of 4.5, and it looked like he was running out of steam. That was not the case. Verlander went right back to being prime Verlander, finishing second in the Cy Young in 2016. But just like the other contracts so far on this list, it wasn't enough to make the Tigers a competitive team, especially in 2007 when they lost a total of 98 games. Realizing they were treading water, they traded Verlander to the Astros for minor leaguers. The Astros went on to win the World Series that year, with Verlander playing a pivotal role in the playoffs. He started a total of 6 playoff games, and the Astros won 5 of them. Verlander didn't stop there. He got even better the last 2 years of the contract, finishing second in the Cy Young in 2018 at the age of 35 and winning the Cy Young outright in 2019 at the age of 36. In total, Verlander signed an inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $144 million, put up 30.3 WAR for a total of $4.75 million per WAR. Number 11, Max Scherzer, 2015, Nationals. Verlander's 2015 contract wasn't even the best pitching contract given out to a free agent eligible player coming from the Tigers that year. The Nationals were a young team with incredible homegrown talent that was looking to add a piece to take them to the next level after winning 96 games in 2014. Scherzer was the guy they set their sights on. Coming off a Cy Young win in 2013 and a 5th place Cy Young finish in 2014, he was the top pitcher available, and the Nationals gave him a 7-year, $210 million deal. What did Scherzer do? He continued to be a stud, finishing top 5 in the Cy Young in all 7 seasons of the contract, winning the award in 2016 and 2017. And for the Nationals, it paid off. They had a winning record the first 5 years of the contract, culminating in a World Series win in 2019. Scherzer also pitched 2 no-hitters for the Nationals and tied Roger Clemens and Kerry Wood for the record for most strikeouts in a game with 20. Unfortunately, the Nationals took a major step back in 2020, and in 2021 decided to trade Scherzer to the Dodgers to start their rebuild. Looking at those results, you might be wondering why Scherzer is all the way back at number 11 on this list. Mostly, it's because how large the contract was. Adjusted for inflation, it's the second biggest contract on this list, only beaten by A-Rod. Looking at raw WAR production, Scherzer put up the 4th most of any contract on this list. In total, Scherzer signed an inflation-adjusted contract of 7 years, $195.6 million, put up 41.5 WAR for a total of $4.7 million per WAR. Number 10, Barry Bonds, 2002, Giants. Bonds was just coming off his record-breaking 2001 where he hit an incredible 73 home runs and got on base almost 52% of the time. There's probably some reasons why he went Super Saiyan, but I'm not going to get into that. What amazes me is the dollar amount on this contract. Yes, Bonds was going on 37 years old, so a lower number of years than the A-Rod deal makes sense, but in terms of average annual value, contracts backed in the 90s and early 2000s were all over the place. A-Rod signed a deal that was making him $22 million a year. Bonds was coming off the greatest offensive season we've seen since Babe Ruth, yet his contract of 5 years, $90 million came to only $18 million per season. We've seen a shift in the last few years where aging Hall of Fame caliber players sign shorter deals for much higher average annual salary, like Scherzer signing a 3-year, $130 million deal with the Mets, and Verlander signing a 2-year, $86.6 million contract just a week ago, making both of them the highest paid players in the league in 2023. Bonds' deal, on the other hand, only made him the 5th highest paid player in the league. For a guy that seemingly broke baseball in 2001, that seemed like an underpay. Maybe the concern was that Bonds wasn't going to continue to be that guy. Well, that didn't turn out to be true. Bonds continued his dominance, winning MVP in 2002, 2003, and 2004, while putting up an insane .575 on-base percentage in that time. When people bring up video game numbers, this is the one instance in my lifetime where a player actually was putting up video game numbers. For an illustration on that, I very much recommend the video, What If Barry Bonds Had Played Without a Baseball Bat on Secret Base. The only reason this contract isn't higher is Bonds missed almost the entire 2005 season with a knee injury, and in 2006 he wasn't nearly at the level he was from 2001 to 2004, putting up only 4 WAR. Without that injury, this contract could have been in the running for the best of all time. Over Bonds' inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $162.3 million, he produced 36.2 WAR for a total of $4.48 million per WAR. Number 9, Chipper Jones, 2001, Braves. This is one that kind of went under the radar. I mean, yes, Jones is a Hall of Famer, but over the course of the 8-year contract extension with the Braves, he never finished top 5 in the MVP voting and only made the All-Star game twice. But what he did during this contract was just be consistently good. 7 of the 8 seasons were over 4 WAR, and the one that wasn't was still 3.2. He hit .317 over the course of the contract, 219 home runs, and had an OPS just shy of 1,000. Unlike a lot of the other contracts on this list, his team was mostly good throughout the contract, making the playoffs in 5 of 8 seasons and winning over 100 games twice, but unfortunately we were never able to make a run to the World Series. Luckily, Chipper still has his ring from 1995. The other thing to mention is the Braves signed this contract at the perfect time just before salaries in baseball exploded. The league average salary went up almost 50% in those 8 years. So while he was one of the top 15 highest paid player for the first 5 years of the contract, the last 3 he wasn't even top 25 in the league. And the last 2 years of the contract were 2 of the best years of his career where he put it up 7.6 and 7.3 WAR. His inflation-adjusted contract came to $22.9 million per year, one of the lowest costs on this list. That's how this contract got to be this high on the list. High amount of years, relatively low average annual value, and consistently great production. During an inflation-adjusted contract of 8 years, $183.3 million, Chipper put up 42.7 WAR for a total of $4.3 million per WAR. Number 8, Mike Schmidt, 1982, Phillies. This one stands out because it's the only contract from the first 18 years of MLB free agency on the list. That's because in the early days of free agency, teams didn't really give out free agent contracts or extensions more than 5 years that often. The only exception was really the Yankees with Dave Winfield. Mike Schmidt was the first non-Yankee contract I can find of more than 5 years. And there's a reason for that. Mike Schmidt was clearly the best position player of the late 70s and early 80s. The guy was on another level, putting up 14 consecutive 5+ WAR seasons, with 13 of those being over 6. And this entire contract falls at the tail end of that streak. During the contract, he finished top 10 in MVP voting 4 times and won the award in 1986. Add in 4 Gold Gloves as well as a Phillies World Series appearance in 1983, and this extension was a smashing success. All told, his inflation-adjusted contract of 6 years, $152.8 million, Schmidt put up 38.5 WAR, good enough for $3.97 million per WAR. Number 7, Ivan Rodriguez, 1998, Rangers. This one barely met the threshold of an inflation-adjusted $100+ million contract at $100,746,908.35, which means it's going to be low on the production end of this list. During this 5-year extension with the Rangers, Pudge put up 2 6.4 WAR seasons, including one MVP trophy. Those 2 years also included playoff appearances for the Rangers, but unfortunately they were both pretty quick exits as the Rangers got swept in the NLDS by the Yankees in both 1998 and 1999, where Pudge went 4 for 22 with only one extra base hit, a double. But outside of those playoff appearances, Pudge was one of the best defensive catchers at the time, putting up a total of 8.7 D-WAR, and was the only full-time catcher during those seasons to throw out more than 50% of attempted base stealers with a caught stealing percentage of 53%. To show how dominant that is, there wasn't another catcher with over 300 games with over 40% during that time. He was so good that runners didn't even attempt to steal on him. An extreme comparison, in 4,833 innings, there were only 300 stolen base attempts against Pudge. Mike Piazza caught 5,465 innings those same 5 years and had 749 stolen base attempts against him. That's over twice the rate of Pudge. He wasn't too shabby of a hitter either, putting up a 130 OPS plus. In total, in his inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $100.75 million, Pudge put up 25.7 WAR for a total of $3.9 million per WAR. Number 6, Scott Rolen, 2003, Cardinals. Rolen came up with the Phillies and immediately entered the conversation as one of the best third basemen in the game at the time, along with Chipper Jones. But near the end of his time with Philadelphia, he criticized the Phillies' commitment to winning and turned down a massive contract extension with the team. Seeing the writing on the wall, the Phillies traded Rolen to the Cardinals near the 2002 trade deadline. The Cardinals wasted no time in starting extension talks and signed Rolen to an 8-year deal less than 2 months after they traded for him. Rolen's 2004 was perhaps the crown jewel of this contract, putting up a 9.2 WAR season. Among third basemen, he was only behind Adrian Beltre, a Hall of Famer that also had a career year. Just like Beltre, Rolen's defense at third consistently rated near the top of the league year in and year out, giving him 3 Gold Gloves during the contract. And also like Beltre, he had good offensive numbers to go along with it. Rolen also got a 2006 World Series ring, but not all was roses in Rolen's relationship with the Cardinals. In 2005, he suffered a season-ending injury to his shoulder after a collision in the field, and when arthroscopic surgery and rehabilitation didn't solve the issue, Rolen sought reconstructive surgery, but the Cardinals disagreed and wouldn't let him get it. He ended up threatening to sue the Cardinals to allow the surgery. At the end of the 2007 season, Cardinals manager Tony La Russa polled the team on whether he should return as manager in 2008, and Rolen was the only player to vote no. When La Russa signed on for 2 more years with the Cardinals, Rolen requested a trade, and that offseason was sent to the Blue Jays for Troy Glaus. After a year and a half with Toronto, Rolen was traded again to the Reds for the last year and a half of this contract. The front end of this contract was an amazing success, with 21.3 WAR in the first 4 years. The middle of the contract was a bit of a disappointment with injury issues, but Rolen finished strong the last 2 years of the contract with 5.2 and 4.1 WAR seasons. In total, the Cardinals signed Rolen to an inflation-adjusted contract of 8 years, $136.5 million. Rolen put up 35.9 WAR, good enough for $3.8 million per WAR. Number 5, Pedro Martinez, 1998, Red Sox. This 5-year deal contained 2 of the best pitching seasons in baseball history. I highly recommend Foolish Baseball's video, Pedro Martinez pitched the greatest season ever, then he did it again, which goes over how amazing Pedro's 1999 and 2000 seasons were. Those 2 seasons were well documented as elite, but the rest of the contract wasn't chopped liver either. He finished second in the Cy Young voting in 1998 and 2002, and only didn't get votes in 2001 due to a rotator cuff tear that kept him out for 2 months of the year. Over those 5 years, in the height of the steroid era, Pedro had an ERA of 2.27. To show how impressive that is, the closest to Pedro was Randy Johnson with 2.65, but more on him later. Pedro's ERA plus was 212, and he had a record of 87 and 24. Pedro also performed well in the playoffs with a record of 3-0 and an ERA of 1.13 in 4 playoff starts. Unfortunately for him, the Red Sox went 2-8 in playoff games where Pedro didn't pitch, and also didn't make the playoffs the last 3 years of Pedro's contract. That means Pedro never saw the World Series stage during this contract. Fortunately, the Red Sox did extend him for 2 years afterwards, and he got to start Game 3 of the 2004 World Series. In the inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $152.5 million, Pedro put up 41.1 WAR for a total of $3.7 million per WAR. Number 4, Adrian Beltre, 2011, Rangers. When I mentioned that Mariners fans may be disappointed in Beltre's production with them, this is why. His 6-year deal with the Rangers makes his 5-year deal with the Mariners look relatively bad. Beltre is one of the most under-the-radar Hall of Famers we've seen in the last 20 years. He never even made an All-Star game until he turned 31. However, it was his time with the Rangers that made people go, wait a minute, this guy is a no-doubt first-ballot Hall of Famer. I've asked this trivia question to other people. Who has the highest career WAR among internationally signed players? And have yet to have someone get it right on the first guess. Not only is it Beltre, it's Beltre by a lot. Pedro Martinez comes in at number 2 with almost 10 less WAR, and Robinson Cano of all people comes in at number 3 with almost 25 less WAR. People overlooking and underestimating Beltre showed up in his pay. Throughout the entire 6-year deal with the Rangers, Beltre was never one of the top 25 paid players in the league, but he produced like one. He not only hit .308 with an OPS plus of 132 and 167 home runs, but he was the best defensive third baseman in the league during this time, with only Manny Machado and Nolan Arenado coming close in defensive runs saved. While Beltre never received MVP votes in his 5-year contract with the Mariners, he got MVP votes in every single season of this contract with the Rangers. Beltre is the guy where at the age of 30, if you had a conversation trying to predict his Hall of Fame chances, you'd probably go, not likely, unless he goes off in his 30s. And then he's the guy that goes off in his 30s. Beltre signed an inflation-adjusted contract of 6 years, $117.9 million, produced 35.8 WAR for a total of $3.29 million per WAR. Number 3, Greg Maddux, 1993, Braves. So I already pushed this list going to top 15, but I even considered going to top 16 because the number 16 contract was Greg Maddux's 1998 extension with the Braves. Well, I guess I kind of just went to 16 because I told you what contract it was. Anyway, going into 1993, Greg Maddux was coming off a great year with the Cubs where he won Cy Young. It was by far the best year of his career up to that point, but the Braves were hoping he had more to come and gave him a 5-year, $28 million deal. And boy, was that an amazing investment. He claimed both the ERA title and Cy Young award in each of the first 3 years of the deal. The last 2 years weren't too shabby either, getting 5th and 2nd in Cy Young voting. Funny thing is, this almost didn't happen. In a recent interview, Maddux said he was fully intending to sign with the Yankees. He met with the Yankees, they said they'd be in touch, and then the Yankees never gave him an offer, so Maddux signed with the Braves. Maddux found out later that the reason he didn't get an offer is one of the Yankees' higher-ups, he doesn't know who, had a heart attack. Maybe Maddux is spinning a story, and all that's made up, but it's crazy to think how much would have changed if one of the best pitchers of all time, who spent 11 years with the Braves, had signed with the Yankees instead. The Braves managed to land Maddux with an inflation-adjusted contract of 5 years, $126.3 million. Maddux gave them 39 WAR in return, good enough for $3.24 million per WAR. Number 2, Barry Bonds, 1993, Giants. So we have Bonds' 2002 extension with the Giants where he went Super Saiyan, but amazingly enough, Bonds' contract with the Giants from 1993 to 1998, a period of time that is generally agreed where he hadn't begun PED usage, comes out better. That's how stupid good Bonds was. His lowest OPS season during the stretch was 1.009, and he led the league in OPS that year. His lowest WAR total was 6.2, and that's only because half the season was canceled due to a strike. If there wasn't a strike, this contract could have been number 1. It sometimes gets overlooked how great Bonds was prior to his steroid years. From 1989 to 1998, a period of 10 years, he had 84.3 WAR. That's the highest 10-year stretch since Willie Mays from 1957 to 1966, which is doubly impressive when you consider Bonds played in 2 strike-shortened years in that time frame. While he became a very one-dimensional player later in his career, prime Bonds could do it all. Steal 50 bases, check. Hit 40-plus home runs, check. Get on base over 45% of the time, check. Put up above-average defense, check. What's also mind-boggling is he was this good, was a free agent in his prime, yet he never was the highest paid player in baseball ever during his career. Instead, over the course of this contract, that honor went to Bobby Bonilla, Cecil Fielder, Albert Bell, and Gary Sheffield. And we're not going to see those guys on this list. It was just a weird time in baseball free agency where the best players weren't always signing the biggest contracts. There's not much more you can say about Bonds. Regardless of how you feel about him, he still goes down as one of the best players to ever play the game. His inflation-adjusted contract came to 6 years, $159.9 million. Bonds put up 49.6 WAR for a total of $3.2 million per WAR. Number 1, Randy Johnson, 1999, Diamondbacks. I gotta admit, this study was originally gonna be $100 million contracts that were also 5+ years in duration, but I ended up getting rid of the 5-year requirement because I couldn't in good conscience not include this Randy Johnson contract. This deal is unreal. It's what you get when you have an inner circle Hall of Famer, one of the names thrown around when you're talking greatest pitchers of all time, have his best 4-year peak dominance coincide exactly with a 4-year free agent contract. You can't possibly get any better than having a 4-year contract and winning 4 Cy Youngs. There's the 2001 World Series win, there's the 2002 Triple Crown. We've already talked about Pedro Martinez having the best 2-year stretch of any pitcher in his 1999 and 2000 seasons. But Randy Johnson's 4-year deal is potentially the best 4-year stretch of all time. His strikeout totals during these years were 334, 347, 364, and 372. The 4 highest strikeout totals since 1978 are 334, 347, 364, and 372. And as a little bonus, he even got the number 5 spot with 329 in 1998. To top it all off, he was nowhere close to being the highest paid player in the league. While his deal was paying him $13.35 million in 2001 and 2002, A-Rod was making $22 million. Out of curiosity, I did a check on free agent contract efficiency over the years, and over the last 15 years, teams have had to pay a lot more for WAR and free agency than they did prior. It's why teams are now locking up young, controllable talent on lifetime deals that buy up all of their team control years. With that said, I don't know if we're ever going to see a big free agent contract with as much bang for the buck as we saw with Randy Johnson. The Diamondbacks gave him an inflation-adjusted contract of 4 years, $110.5 million. He put up 38 WAR for a total of $2.91 million per WAR. Now that I don't have to worry about video spoilers, and since you've made it to the end of this video, I got a little treat for you. In the video description, I'm including a link to a spreadsheet that has every single $100+ million contract since the advent of free agency, and how each ranks in the dollars per WAR metric. That spreadsheet also includes the baseball inflation values for each year, so you can see exactly how much MLB salaries have gone up over time. Also, if you've made it this far, I'm assuming you enjoy this type of video. If you could hit the like button as well as subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot to me. There's plenty more coming out in the future, so hit that bell also if you want to be alerted whenever a new video drops.